Thank you everyone for joining us today. We are going to talk today about EQ2's journey to how they really transformed their data quality. And with us today, we have Josh Hoyt. Josh is currently the director of EQ2's Salesforce team, and he has over 2 decades of consulting and IT experience. And a really great story to share with you today about how he really transformed EQ2's, EQ2's process and um, journey. A little bit of background on him. He's worked for some Big Four consultants. He's run his own consulting company for 10 years and is also PMP certified. He's a dual Salesforce certifications as both an app builder and an admin, and also Six Sigma Green Belt. And he is an expert in really implementing complex, large-scale IT initiatives. So we're really excited to hear his insights today. So welcome, Josh. If any of the attendees have any questions, you can go ahead and drop them in the chat, and then he'll address questions at the end of his presentation.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm very blessed to have this opportunity to talk to you. Thank you for your time that you're spending with me. Let me just start out by saying I have a great Salesforce team. I'm biased when I say the best team, but as well as a supportive leadership team at EQT in its truest sense. Those were so vital to our program success, and your team and your executive leadership will no doubt be vital for yours. Let me start out by saying that it's important to understand how you got to your challenge point. What brought you here? Everyone's situation is going to be a bit different, of course. For us, our company history was both unique and relational to our challenges. So, our instance of Salesforce is actually an acquired instance. Rice Energy was bought by EQT in 2017 to become the largest natural gas producer in the United States. So we went from tens of thousands of our landowners who we consider our customers and our biggest segment of our stakeholders that we have to manage. And then in 2017, the acquirer, EQT, shelved Salesforce pretty much everywhere that it was except for land, which is where we managed our landowners. But that's important because there was really a lack of supervision of the application. We had a lot of team members that are still here today that were there, but there wasn't a lot of oversight or guidance, and that's going to be critical to how you address your challenges going forward. And I'll get into that in a little bit later. So we went from tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of our accounts and contacts. And being at a startup, there weren't a lot of guidelines to begin with that we had. We were growing so fast, it was about just getting the business what they needed in an impromptu way. So before you know it, when there was a take back of ownership by the one of the owners who started the acquired company, he came in, had a managerial takeover in 2019 where we resurrected Salesforce at EQT to what it is today. So we have this kind of unique situation where we had the opportunity to implement Salesforce twice. And it is now our center of our universe, what we call the digital working environment, where we have over 1,000 custom objects and over 1,500 business processes that run through Salesforce across all of our 16 departments. So we we push Salesforce to the limit. We're not just sales, we're not just service, but even our legal teams, our finance and accounting teams join in the fray on the application every day. So when you think about that, without a lot of guardrails, growing so fast, just getting the team what they needed without a lot of oversight for several years, we had quite a bit of challenges. And if we were going to be successful, our goal is to be the operator of choice in our industry. we were going to have to tackle this problem, right? And if you're in IT, overseeing an application like Salesforce that houses your stakeholder customer information, you got to ask yourself, is anyone on your team calling out a problem with your data? Or are you just hearing it from customers directly or not hearing it all? Did you ever think no one on your internal teams is telling you because, or even, I mean, not just IT, but even some of your colleagues in other departments, are they being vocal about the problem? Some people are afraid to say there's a problem, not just because they're afraid to take ownership of the problem. If it's the business, hey, you're the one entering this data, and you're going to have to do a lot of the cleanup of the data. If it's IT, you're thinking, how are we going to solve the problem? We don't fully understand all of the business processes, nor did we create this problem, which I'm going to challenge. So it is a collective problem, of course, but IT is likely going to have to show the way, because if you're facing tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of potential duplicates, there's going to have to be tools that will help you get there. There's going to have to be a process reevaluation that your respective PMO or project management or business process optimization organizations are going to have to tackle. And you're going to need that sponsorship, because it's no small task, right? And the business is just going to have to make some of those tough decisions about, should we change our processes? How do we incorporate fixing some of this as we work? Because if you're faced with tens or hundreds of thousands of duplicates, it's not a short task, right? And IT is only going to know so much of the content itself, right? And the business is likely going to be the one that's going to have to make the call on whether that potential duplicate is an actual duplicate. So everybody's got a stake, right? For us at EQT, people were calling out challenges about whether this was the same contact or account. I'm sure you've all heard it, right? There were more than one accounts tied to the same people. Information was being put on the wrong record type, right, as we were servicing them. So it was quite a challenge. So where do you start, right? The first thing you need to do is you're going to have to take inventory, to take stock of your data and how that data works and looks today. So the current state. So think about these questions. Why do you have a data quality issue? What's the current level of quality of your data? How are accounts and contacts created and the supportive processes, and what are those supportive processes around them? How do you know you have a problem? Is it just anecdotal, or have you heard it and seen it for yourself? All right, next slide. So I'm going to get into the framework of how we addressed our challenges. So imagine you're here, you've inherited this challenge, you've been asked to lead the way on solving this challenge. Think about sitting in a room to make a start. Who is going to be at that table, and how are you going to start that conversation? Well, after you've taken inventory, we put together a matrix of all our account and contact types, who we thought owned what or should own it, who can create them, and identifying any early on indicators that there's an issue. Then you can talk about those and talk about where you want to go in order to identify where do you want to go, right? What are the solutions on where we need to get to? So one of the things we tried to do was simplify. In that inventory ourselves, we had over a dozen account record types, and I think we had 13 contact record types. So you can imagine what chaos that might create, right? What challenges that could create, because some people were given permissions to create one over the other. So when They went to go find and put the information they needed on fields they only had access to. They would create another one for their record type, right? So those are the kinds of things that you've got to bring to the table and talk about, and you should really think about how do we simplify, right? So we looked at 4 possible sources of data quality issues. All 4 play a role in how you got to this point, and all 4 will play a role in how you solve it. So first and foremost, strategic governance or lack thereof. In our case, there wasn't a lot of that, right? But it starts from the top. Without a good vision, you can't make it to the moon first, right? And we also have to look at business processes. How do our processes work? What are the inputs? What are the outputs? Who edits what? Who creates what? Are there technical reasons? In our case, there were. And that goes back to permissioning. That goes to allowing too many record types, for example. There could be bugs even that may encourage or facilitate, or maybe not bugs, but nuances of Salesforce. We all know and love those, of course, right? That could be driving duplicates. And I'm going to go over for us, that actually was the case for most of our potential duplicates. Additionally, and this gets often overlooked, I just mentioned the word subtleties of Salesforce. There are so many function points and features of Salesforce. Do your users actually know about some of them? It comes down to examples like, take the global search, for example. You type in an account name or a contact. Some people actually thought if it doesn't come up in that smart match list below, that it doesn't exist in the system. When we, as Salesforce admins, should know that's actually just a cache of your history of who you actually have touched in the recent past. And sometimes Salesforce clears those out. And you have to push the search link below your search in order to see a full list of things. We had, in some cases, believe it or not, 30 of an account, okay? Because they can play multiple roles in our business, they can play multiple roles. They could be a vendor, they could be a landowner, they could be a partnering operator. Um, so there's all kinds of reasons. Another thing I should mention about our history that reminds me is we just announced our 5th acquisition in 4 years, right? And so that also brings challenges with your data and the potential of potential duplicates, right? All right, so now that we have our framework, we can talk about each one of these. Next slide, please. All right, so when you're talking about strategic alignment, you've got to have that vision, of course. And you have to have cohesion, clear direction, being in alignment across the organizations, not just IT, not just business, but also leadership, right? You're going to need that sponsorship. You're going to need those guidelines. You're going to need where are we going, and then educate people at the bottom of what that's going to look like. So we asked ourselves for the strategic alignment, these things, aside from going over that inventory, right? Are you scoring and measuring your quality? You should, if you're not. And Data Groomer has a great way to do that now. When we had Data Groomer, they didn't have that ability, so we built our own score. We built our own score even before we had Data Groomer because we needed to know how big was the problem and where were the issues. So you got to think about how you're going to construct that score. Is there a formality today in managing quality? Probably not if you're finally realizing there's an issue. And what do we consider as having good quality? What makes something, on the antithesis, poor quality? Are you investing in data quality? How? How are you not? And of course, where are we aiming? We can't have that successful marketing campaign if your data quality is poor. And it's certainly difficult to attain high CSAT scores with poor data. And now even more relevant to us in IT, can we have trustworthy AI responses if your, especially customer data, is poor? The answer, of course, is rhetorical, no, right? Therefore, now we got to ask ourselves, who's going to be responsible for what parts of the solutions we come up with? What will our processes look like to address the sources of our problems and maintain good quality going forward? What tools did we need to have? How much is it going to cost? You know, someone's going to ask that, as well as how much effort and time is it going to take? And those are not easy questions, and it's going to take time, and it behooves you to do it, to think through those. So at EQT, we had a VP of operations who is now our SVP of operations. Our VP of IT, of course, provided his support by giving the Salesforce's teams time, and our PMO and our BA's time, and each of the main areas of the business who owned the major types of accounts and contacts were all represented in our committee. It makes sense, right? You need those representatives from across those areas so that you can gain that alignment, help determine the root causes, define the future state, and be a part of the solution to go from there, right? All right, next slide. So where are you aiming, right? How do you know that you've actually reached a point of moving from fixing to more of maintaining good quality? Because that is where you want to be, of course. So what does good look like? And we asked ourselves, and we do that for every project at EQT. So here's what we thought. Well, when your internal customers don't complain to IT about it, when leadership thinks you're spending too much time on it, when CSAT scores go up, of course, when complaint calls go down, most importantly, and most meaningfully, right? When internal teams are following processes, they're involved in the process of improving as the process moves along, then you've gotten to a good place. That's how we envisioned it. All right, next slide. When we looked at now we have our vision, we have our strategic alignment, we have our understanding of our sources of issues, at least at a high level. So how do we shape those plans? How do we start to execute? Okay, so here's a framework that I'm going to go through over the next few slides. We're going to talk about the roles that people play that we looked at, the sources of our data and how they're processed, the different tools as well within Salesforce. So when we say data sources, that could be one object to another. Record types, I mentioned that earlier, of some of the large numbers that we tackled. And we asked ourselves, can they be consolidated? Keep it simple, stupid, right? And project commitment, right? That's where the time and cost element comes into play, and how to quote unquote fix as we work, right? All that had to be presented for that investment to come. All right, so we'll get into our first slide there. Next slide. Okay, so roles. Now, this is where you've got to look at who can create accounts and contacts. And there are some of the, not just for users, but for admins especially, right? There's magic checkboxes all over the place in Salesforce. Those subtleties also apply to us as admins. So who can create accounts and contacts and which types, right? We had so many and we said, this group can create these, this group can create these. And that all was a big source of our issues, right? And we needed, when we looked at it, we actually have a formality with accounts. When we have a fiduciary relationship, whether someone's paying us or we're paying them, that is, we call that a business associate that's aligned to our financial systems name, but that really gives it a formality to it. So, you know, that played an important part to things. But when you had Um, when you have just different groups around the organization that just doesn't know what to do, or they don't see it in that search, that global search, right? They go and they see it and they create it and they're dismissing, potential duplicate, or they know it's a duplicate, but it's not that type, so they think what they're doing is correct, but nobody told them so, right? You've got to look at all of those things. And you should also consider, as we did, and we didn't use it as much as that object, that leads object. That leads object is purposeful for Salesforce. Its intention is to try to keep your accounts and contacts clean. It can be a mechanism that filters out yay or nay in terms of bringing more formality into your system, right? And you also have to look at who can merge dupes. Can anyone? We recently discovered that there was an accidental wipeout of information because there are some groups that there's some fields that are sensitive on an account on occasion. And if people merge that, but they don't have the opportunity to see it, and they happen to pick the wrong account, it can wipe out that information. So those are also important considerations to this. All right, next slide. Okay, data. So where does information come from? From external forums, like we have website forums on our EQT.com branded site. Are they coming from data loads? Are they coming from places like i360, other sources of external information that you might get through APIs or whatnot? From emails and phone calls, right? There's manual entry where for us, that's where a lot of it comes from. And then that question of do we use leads? Should we use leads? And I would encourage that because there is a conversion element to leads. And what we did is when we consolidated down to 4 record types, account record types, we went down to 3 contact record types. And we're going to move to a third very shortly within our environment on the account side. We also implemented an approval process for each one of those, and that actually did the conversion. So there's a lot of cool things you can do with using leads as that conduit and that filtering point, that border, if you will, on moving them into the account process. All right, next slide. All right, just back on that notion of the record types, I talked about how many we consolidated, right? And I just encourage you to keep it simpler because the more people have to know who are on the front lines of gathering that intelligence about your accounts and contacts. And this can, go on to other objects as well, but vital to your CRM, vital to your AI efforts and your marketing campaigns, of course, is why I'm focused on accounts and contacts. But the more simple you can make it, the less people have to remember. Obviously, the more they have to remember, the more things they're going to forget, right? So make it intuitive, make it easier for them. Try to consolidate where you can. We actually spoke with Salesforce.com themselves about how they do things, and they do actually, at the time at least, they separate their customer side from their service side, so their sales side from their service side. We are trying to actually merge those two even for us. But there is understanding that, those can be two different things, but you still have to give a way to notify people that, hey, there is a potential duplicate for this record type. Just know that, make sure that you're putting the information that's relevant to maybe that forced duplicate situation, right, in the right place. All right, next slide. All right. Lastly, we talk about timing. So when you think about that, how long it's going to take, you really do have to be realistic. I touched upon this a few slides ago. Just think about for a moment. even if you have just tens of thousands of potential duplicates to go through, and maybe you have in the hundreds of thousands, you have to be realistic about how long that's going to take to get to a good place. And what you should be aiming for if you do have that high of a number, you should be aiming to when do we get to a point where we're actually just trying to address those duplicates as we work. And when I say as we work, what do I mean by that? So as part of our education process, we talk to people about just in general first. Hey, everybody often, will interact with an external stakeholder at some point, um, whether it's an email, whether it's a phone call, right? And those that are in our call centers, we spent more time with how we're going to address our data quality challenges because that is very process specific. They touch the most accounts and contacts. They were a part of merging and identifying duplicates and whatnot. But we spoke about what is a what does potential duplicate mean, and therefore what is an actual duplicate versus what is not. And you got to start adding elements and tools for them that may be simple. Take advantage of some of the things that you can do in Salesforce. So we actually brought a visual indicator to indicate where of the quality scale did that record account and contact fit in. Was it, considered green with a check mark that it was very high quality? Was it, amber? Was it red? Was it black? Like really bad, no information other than the name kind of thing. Right. So we brought those indicators in. We actually brought in why they got that score so they could see what was wrong. Later on, when we had data groomer, we brought in the verification status of their contact points, such as address, email, and phone number. But so we reminded people, hey, when you've got an email, when you're talking to somebody on the phone, are they in Salesforce? They should be if you're interacting with them. And if they're not in Salesforce, they don't exist. And while you're on the phone or email with them, take a look at their account and contact and make sure that things are up to date. If their email looks invalid because you're on the phone with them, ask them about it, right? Okay. So it for us, it was a 4-year journey, really, 3 to 4 years. And just that's realistic, right? I mean, just think about going through sets of thousands and how long that can take. We gamified the experience, for our internal team to just make it fun. And Data Groomer just creates these great views that we put ourselves into a position of we're gonna know pretty clearly, and maybe we do have to double check things in the system real quick, but get that view where you're comfortable to make a call of, yep, this is a duplicate. No, it's not. We had less than a 0.2% error rate on literally tens of thousands approaching 100,000 potential duplicates. I consider that very good. All right. We can move to the next slide. All right, so back on that framework of strategy, process, and now we're on technology, and I'll talk about education in the coming slides here. So what we implement as IT and what we allow for and what we design does influence our data quality. And so we asked ourselves, did we overcomplicate ourselves? Do we allow just anyone to create accounts and contacts? Should we leverage leads? Should we have forced duplicates? I talked about that previously. Does our registration process or lead intake process facilitate or encourage duplicates? So on that one got us. So our largest source of contacts for us are our service providers. So we have a Salesforce community experience where anyone who goes to one of our field locations has to take an annual safety test, and they must pass, and they get a card, a physical card with a QR code, where our guard check security personnel checks to make sure they pass the test, that they're an active contact, etc. Well, every year we change the test and we deregister every company, and they have to re-register. Now, that doesn't necessarily deactivate their user. It doesn't. But when they register, they had to register with their email. And our first process used email as username. Common thing to do, right? However, subtlety of Salesforce, you need a unique username. So when people re-registered, they were getting a block. You can't register as that user already exists. Even if they were inactive, you get that error. And so as we were analyzing our data, we were seeing a lot of things like josh.hoyt at EQT.com, then josh.hoyt1 at EQT.com. 2 years later, josh.hoyt2 at EQT.com. The registration process would allow them right into the experience. They took the video once or to the point of passing, and they moved on until the next year. That was the biggest source of our contact problem right there. So, and it actually was not easy to address, but we totally re-architected our pre-registration process as a result. And that's why it took us 3 or 4 years, because we started weeding those people out and seeing that, okay, their real one now took into effect. I know that Josh.Hoyt 1 or 2 is fake, right? Just it's circumvent. People just find a way to work around the issue, right? And all right, so I talked about, of course, how are we going to build a score? So for us, we took every contact point into every major contact point. Having a second, phone number didn't weigh in, but did they have a phone number? Did they have an email? Did they have an address? Did they have a community user? We gave them more points for that because, well, we know more about them when they're a community experience user, right? Was there a potential duplicate? And we had a process for people to identify, hey, you looked at the potential duplicate and determined that they're not duplicates. And in Salesforce, it will forever show. And one of the things that's frustrating to me about their whole potential duplicate process is they're there forever unless you merge them. It's really annoying. So we gave a mechanism for people to, to say, this is not a duplicate. And they would put the date that they evaluated it, and we gave them 2 years on the score so that those points would not count against them. We gave negative points for that. And then later on, because things are going to evolve, when we incorporated data groomer, we could actually we could bring in the validity of those contact points, right? Another big point getter was if we had a formal fiduciary relationship, if they were what we called a formal account, that it gave them a lot of points, because when we have a fiduciary relationship, we know a heck of a lot more about them, because we're writing checks or getting checks, so we know their address and their contact information at the account level at least is good, right? All right, next slide. All right, so I talked a lot about some of those education points before, right? So what is a duplicate, what's not a duplicate, how do you recognize poor quality? These are the things that you need to instill in your folks, because there are some things on my team at Salesforce or for the Salesforce team or the IT team in general. Certainly, we have service providers, right? Salesforce.com being one of them. So we do certainly keep information about accounts and contacts, but that's just a small percentage. We also make a contact for every one of our users. That's a common practice. So all of our employees, all of our contractors who have full licenses, those are things that IT can control. But for the majority, and probably likely for you all, is that the rest of the business has the biggest chunk. And so it's it's more easy for you to probably control and educate your IT department on these things, and you have to set that gold standard for everybody else to look at. But since the majority of accounts and contacts are being created and maintained by the rest of the organization, you do have to emphasize this education process. So we defined what good quality looked like and what poor quality was like. And like I said, we scored it and we put that as a visual indicator front and center. And reminding people, how is a duplicate identified and how do you resolve that? Pretty soon, we're going to get to a point where we're going to take away the merge process, the native merge process in Salesforce here at EQT, and completely go on Data Groomer, because one of the things I love about Data Groomer that you cannot do in Salesforce is unmerge. What an awesome feature that is. Um, and then again, we also added some things in there about, and this just kind of a disappointment for me of a CRM company to not have some sort of attribute, some sort of drop down, some sort of checkbox of, does the contact even still work there? Did they retire? Did they leave? Don't delete them, because Salesforce is very relational. You may have cases that are related to contacts. So we don't allow deletion. We allow merging, and we allow to identify that someone actually doesn't work there. So that was a huge thing for us to add, and especially on that annual safety test process where we're dealing with their safety administrators for people to re-register. We now revealed the rosters, certain contact point information for their company that they could review and tell us they don't work there anymore. And you know what an easy decision that is, even if they're not really the same person. But if they don't work there and it looks, yeah, close enough, guess what we do? We merge them, because nobody should care anymore, right? Um, so, and just again, calling out, now that we had Data Groomer and could do those contact point verifications, are they missing? Are they invalid? So as you work and as you're conversing with these folks, can you actually, do you have a chance to try to correct that problem? Okay, we can go to the next slide. So that went over our framework there, and I'm happy to present these results after our journey. We are now in maintenance mode, I am glad to say. And Data Groomer was such a huge help, huge help. In that time frame, we doubled our accounts and contacts, but we improved our quality by 50% in both accounts and contacts based on our scoring method. Usually it's the opposite. When you're adding more data and you didn't address the problems that you had, generally it's going to get worse. And I mentioned that we just announced our fifth acquisition in 4 years. We completed 4 of them. On each of them, we prevented around 15% of our landowners from when we ingested their landowner information into ours. We stopped almost 15% of duplicates. And that is really meaningful, because we pay royalties to our landowners. And what that would mean when they have a duplicate is they would get multiple royalty statements, and they get 1099s every year. That can be very confusing. I am most proud of our team doing that. And Data Groomer is at the center point of preventing those. And another great feature that I love about Data Groomer is we've got standardized information. So with those acquisitions, some of that information came in all caps or lowercase, or The different spellings of street abbreviations and phone numbers. Well, we standardize all of that now through Data Groomer. So all those address abbreviations are abbreviated properly. We have the names in proper case, which is more modern, right? Those all caps are just, resemble or are nostalgic of very old and stodgy systems. And that phone number standardization, of course, is we have Service Cloud Voice implemented. So that's our call center is Salesforce technology. So that's key so that there isn't any issues when people matching on phone numbers when people call in. And of course, just reiterating, we train the heck out of our agents to look at those verification results, right, and contact points. Are they missing? Do they say invalid? That is just so important to the process. And when our call center is managing 25,000 cases a year, there's a lot of contacts and accounts that they're interfacing with. So that's how you truly get those numbers to improve. But be careful. We personally don't use the merge all function that Data Groomer has. It's amazing, and I hope we can get there one day. In our industry, service providers especially, we're in an industry where people's families work together. So there's a lot of juniors, seniors, thirds, and fourths, husband and wives that might have a name that could go either way, like Chris. We have seen it all where we think, oh, that's got to be a unique name. I mentioned that we had about a 0.2% incorrect merge rate. Yep, we measure those two. That we have seen it all. So we actually have a policy where we don't use that. So you gotta think about that, and instead we focused on what view of the side by side of potential duplicates gives us the best, quickest way to make a call. And one of the great things about Data Groomer is the ability to filter, and that's why you can't use Salesforce reports to really address this big of an issue if it really is in the tens or hundreds of thousands. We actually added the community user link and all user links to our contacts and even show the last login, because if they haven't logged in 6 or 7 years, it's pretty safe that you could probably merge them. And again, with stats like, hey, we only have a 0.2% incorrect merge rate, we're confident when we push that button. Get yourself to that point. All right. So I think we are at the question point. Next slide. I'd be glad to take your questions.
We have one question that someone popped in the chat that about, do you have any recommendations on how to get like a quick win or two right when you start?
I think you've got to, so one of the things I said was make sure you have a mechanism to identify if those contacts don't work there, and consider the formality of your accounts. So what I mean by that is, can you take stock of who can create? Can you quickly try to consolidate that down to fewer people that approve of the account going in? Because if you do that first at the point of creation, then that's an opportunity right there, of course, to try to gather as much information you can so the score gets higher. And then figure out your next, I would say, is figure out how to score your quality. All right.
Can
Any other
you
questions here?
could you tell us a little bit about kind of why you selected Data Groomer when you were reviewing some various options?
Great question. And I'm not getting paid to say this. I just really love Data Groomer in terms of, I think it's one of our favorite apps that we have on the App Exchange, and we have well over a dozen incorporated into our organization. We did have, we looked at 4 or 5 vendors. I'm not going to name the other ones, but we had 2 finalists. Data Groomer, of course, was one of them. And what it came down for us was the intuitiveness of the tool. We didn't get a lot of guidance we didn't need a lot of guidance from Data Groomer. And that's what we wanted. Just, hey, just give us the tool, give us kind of a quick tour of where to go and how to just get started. And we'll take it from there. And if we have any other questions, we'll let you know. And we had much fewer questions with Data Groomer. And then when we had interactions with them, they were right there, could explain it, and we could more importantly, understand it and follow it very easily, whether it was spoken word or on email as we were going through our evaluation. How quickly and easily we could set up the standardization. Just the visual of it is so much nicer. The ability to filter is so easy, and building that model and the AI component, the element to it, they were ahead of everybody else. And that, we're very forward thinking and knew it was going to take a lot of time to get through this, and knew that we wanted to invest in a tool that was going to be with us for a long time. And that the verification aspect of it as well, verifying the content points. Now, they can't be associative. Of course, they can't see that, oh, that phone number is Josh Hoyt's phone number, but they can tell you if it's invalid or not. And that's okay. There's other tools to do that, but we wanted to just get that far. And the way that you can actually filter on those results, and more importantly, put that verification status back into Salesforce. And the other tool couldn't do it. Maybe they can now, but it just seemed like Data Groomer thought about the Salesforce experience and how to be able to recognize those ways of quick wins in terms of, you've got your data sets ready, filter it down so that you can start slicing the data. You can start to see those insights of, hey, maybe we should include attributes of, do they work? Does that contact point work for that company anymore? What was their last login? That all that stuff came in after we acquired Data Groomer, but it just really gives you the ability to think about, how can we enhance this? How do we get to a decision quicker? All right,
Um,
Sarah, next.
yeah, and we have a guest, Amy, that's asking if you've ever had issues with the forms auto-populating account or contact data in Salesforce, and how do you handle that from a process perspective?
Forms auto-populating. I'm not sure I quite follow. Maybe you
Maybe
mean
like a
like from
marketing
another
form?
source?
Yeah.
Um, because we're a Salesforce-centric shop, we use the web to case or web, and we just worked with our webmasters to take that form and put it into leads. The leads object became obvious to us that we should be using that, because as we consolidated down to who could actually create accounts, and that became a very small number from a large number, we still needed the business to move forward. Not anybody can create contacts. We allow that. But when you take away that power, so to speak, or you consolidate that power, leads gave us a way to still enable people to put that in to the system, but we just check it first. Check it for quality, for relevance, you know, context. Who are these? What is this organization? We get solicitations all the time. Now we can do some pre-work outside of Salesforce, if you will. It's still within Salesforce, but because it's not an account yet, it's still just kind of well, this is in process status, right? Hopefully I answered your question there. I'm not sure if I did.
All right, does anyone have any other questions? We have a few more minutes. All right. If not, thank you so much for sharing that story. That's really interesting and really a lot of helpful practical tips as well.